he was a farm boy who became the most listened to preacher in history. A Southern evangelist who defied segregation. A spiritual counselor to presidents and queens. This is part 2 of Billy Graham's story, where his crusades didn't just fill stadiums, they changed nations. All expectations when organizers had to move the final services to Times Square and Yankee Stadium to accommodate the crowds. Nightly attendance averaged 18,000 to 20,000, with thousands more listening on loudspeakers outside. Graham's simple yet powerful messages on repentance and grace cut through the city's cynicism, creating an unprecedented spiritual awakening in post-war America. This marathon revival not only proved Graham's cross-cultural appeal but also demonstrated that modern cities, not just tent revivals, could become centers of spiritual transformation. The Madison Square Garden crusade cemented Graham's status as America's pastor and set the stage for his future global impact. Billy Graham didn't just transform American evangelism, he became the first preacher to conduct truly global revival on an unprecedented scale. His international crusades read like a Cold War-era map of spiritual hotspots. In 1954, Graham's 12-week London crusade defied expectations, packing Haringey Arena nightly with over 2 million total attendees, including a young John Stott who helped bridge British evangelical divides. The event so impacted England that the BBC broadcasted his sermons nationwide. The 1973 Seoul, Korea crusade became the largest Christian gathering in history at that time, with 1.1 million people filling Yoido Plaza, a stunning display of faith in a nation rebuilding after war. Even behind the Iron Curtain, Graham's 1982 Moscow preaching tour made headlines as he boldly shared Christ under communist scrutiny. His ability to navigate political tensions while preaching uncompromised truth became his trademark. From Nigeria to Australia, Graham's global crusades proved the gospel's universal power, often drawing crowds that dwarfed political rallies and sporting events. These weren't just sermons, they were historic moments where nations paused to consider eternity. At the height of racial tension in 1950s America, Billy Graham took a bold stand that would redefine evangelism's role in the civil rights movement. During his 1953 Chattanooga crusade in the segregated South, Graham made history by personally removing the ropes dividing black and white attendees, declaring, "There is no segregation at the foot of the cross." This defiant act, years before the Civil Rights Act, cost him Southern supporters but cemented his integrity. Graham's integration policy wasn't just symbolic, he canceled events when local organizers resisted, including a 1962 Mississippi rally. His friendship with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whom he invited to pray at his 1957 New York crusade, showed his growing commitment to racial justice. While critics argue he could have done more politically, Graham's integrated crusades became powerful witnesses of Christian unity in an era of division. His actions proved that for Billy Graham, the gospel wasn't just preached, it was lived. Billy Graham's spiritual influence extended into the corridors of global power, making him one of history's most connected evangelists. From Eisenhower to Obama, he served as an unofficial chaplain to the White House, offering prayer and counsel during pivotal moments, including the Cuban Missile Crisis and Watergate scandal. His 50-year friendship with Lyndon B. Johnson included private Bible studies at the LBJ Ranch, while Richard Nixon's presidency nearly derailed Graham's reputation when controversial tapes surfaced, leading to Graham's heartfelt public repentance. Beyond America, Graham's global appeal opened doors no preacher had walked through before. Queen Elizabeth II welcomed him for multiple private audiences, and his historic 1992 trip to North Korea, where he preached to crowds and dined with Kim Il-sung, showcased his unique role as a gospel diplomat during the Cold War. These extraordinary relationships proved Graham wasn't just shaping souls, he was quietly influencing the world's most powerful leaders at defining historical crossroads. At 76 years old, Billy Graham made history again by harnessing cutting-edge technology to shatter evangelistic boundaries. His June 1995 global mission became the most expansive sermon ever delivered, a satellite-linked telecast that reached a staggering 1 billion viewers across 185 countries simultaneously. Broadcasting from a Puerto Rico studio to 47,000 host sites worldwide, from Moscow movie theaters to African villages with projector screens, Graham's message transcended language barriers with real-time translation into 48 languages. This unprecedented event combined Graham's signature simplicity with technological ambition. Imagine stadium crusades meeting the digital age before the internet era. The global mission proved that even in his later years, Graham remained evangelism's great innovator, leveraging satellites where tents once sufficed. With 2.5 million response cards recording decisions for Christ, this one-night wonder demonstrated that in Graham's hands, mass media wasn't about celebrity, it was about carrying the gospel into all the world on an unimaginable scale. For over half a century, Billy Graham served as spiritual counselor to an extraordinary succession of U.S. presidents, earning his title as America's pastor. His nonpartisan approach allowed him to minister to commanders-in-chief across party lines, from praying with Harry Truman in 1950 to offering spiritual guidance to Barack Obama decades later. Graham's Oval Office access reached its peak during Lyndon Johnson's presidency, where he became such a trusted confidant that he was summoned to the White House during the 1968 riots and even gave the eulogy at Johnson's funeral. His 50-year friendship with Richard Nixon proved more complicated. The Watergate tapes revealed Graham's private criticisms of Jewish influence, leading to his profound public apology and deepened commitment to interfaith respect. Later presidents, including George W. Bush, credited Graham with helping shape their faith journeys. More than just a presidential prayer partner, Graham became America's moral compass during turbulent times, his quiet White House visits often coinciding with national crises when leaders sought both spiritual comfort and the popular legitimacy his endorsement provided. While never marching at the front lines, Billy Graham played a pivotal, if complex, role in America's civil rights movement. His friendship with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. began in 1957 when Graham invited the civil rights leader to pray at his New York crusade, creating one of the era's most powerful interracial Christian alliances. Behind the scenes, Graham used his influence to bail King out of jail during the 1960 Albany movement and quietly pressured white Southern pastors to reject segregation. Graham took his boldest stand in 1953 when he removed segregated ropes at his Chattanooga crusade, declaring racial division incompatible with Christianity. His integrated revivals throughout the South, including a groundbreaking 1964 Birmingham campaign, became living demonstrations of racial reconciliation. Though critics wished he'd been more politically vocal, Graham's approach, confronting racism through spiritual transformation rather than protest, won over countless white conservatives to the cause of equality. His ministry proved that in Billy Graham's America, the altar call was open to all, regardless of skin color. Billy Graham revolutionized evangelism by transcending denominational divides at a time when Protestant factions rarely collaborated. His crusades became unprecedented ecumenical gatherings, uniting Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, and Pentecostals under one banner, a radical concept in mid-20th century Christianity. Graham went further, building bridges with Catholic and Orthodox leaders years before the modern ecumenical movement took shape. His 1977 visit with Pope Paul VI marked a historic thaw in Protestant-Catholic relations, while his 1982 Moscow sermons, approved by the Russian Orthodox Church, demonstrated his gift for navigating ancient theological divides. Graham's secret? Focusing on the core gospel message while respecting denominational differences. He filled his advisory committees with clergy from across traditions and welcomed Catholic bishops as platform guests at his crusades. This Big Tent approach not only expanded his audience but modeled a new kind of evangelicalism, one that could hold firm to biblical truth while embracing Christians across historical divides. In an era of religious fragmentation, Graham became the rare figure who could make Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox believers recognize their shared faith. Behind Billy Graham's very public evangelism stood his most trusted advisor and spiritual compass, Ruth Bell Graham. The daughter of Presbyterian missionaries to China, Ruth brought a sharp theological mind, linguistic gifts, she spoke 5 languages, and a missionary's heart to their marriage. While Billy traveled the world, Ruth managed their Montreat, North Carolina home, raising their 5 children and providing the stability that allowed his ministry to flourish. But her influence went far beyond homemaking. Ruth edited Billy's sermons, co-wrote books, and became his most candid critic, once famously telling him after a lackluster sermon, "You'd better go back and spend more time on your knees." Her witty, grounded perspective balanced his fame. When asked if she'd ever considered divorce, she quipped, "No, murder, but never divorce." Ruth's legacy endures in the Ruth and Billy Graham Children's Health Center and her own prolific writing. More than just the evangelist's wife, she was the steady hand that guided history's most famous preacher, proving that some of Graham's most powerful ministry happened not in stadiums, but in the quiet of their mountain home. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Billy Graham's legacy, don't forget to smash that like button, it helps others find this content. And subscribe for more untold stories of faith and history. I'll see you in the next one.